live. Welcome to episode 4 of No Man's Land. We've got our orc tonight, Dark. Say hello to everybody.
Hello, everyone. Howdy doody. And we got a very special guest with us today. And give a good round of applause to
Greetings, brothers.
Avidus.
Almost hit that timing. So close.
Indeed, almost.
Sorry. I was a little belated. And he was very excited. But it's good to have
Over
him
eager.
here as a guest star.
Thank you.
Maybe.
Thank you. It's good to be here for Under the Helmet.
So, tonight we have been beating around this subject for a while. In all of the previous episodes that we've been going through this, we've talked on ego management, managing your ego, looking out for your ego, checking your ego, and we're going to spend tonight really kind of making sure that we understand that subject and working through some of that. And so, be excited for some of the dialogue tonight. Be excited to go through some of this. It's a topic that I hope to have people, I guess, think a little bit deeper about, because I think on the surface you may have some assumptions about this subject. So for tonight, we're going to be looking at defining the terms, some very basic terminology that we're using, make sure we're all on the same page. We're going to discuss why is it a problem? Why are we even talking about this? Why is it important to manage our egos and check our egos? And then we're going to go through some tactics and strategies as we normally do, talking about how to manage your own ego and how to lead the ego of others, depending on where they're at in their journey, right? So just getting straight into it, right? So in looking to define our terms, ego, and these are like textbook definitions, if you will, right? So ego is a person's sense of self-esteem or self-importance in a very, very raw sense. It is usually informed by a sense of pride. That is a satisfaction associated with achievements or the achievements of someone you associate with. You can have pride in your own achievements, and that improves your ego, it bolsters your ego. You can have pride in the achievements of the outfit that you're associated with. Again, we got a lot of DK guys that tune into this, of course, and many of us have a lot of pride in our outfit. We've got a lot of accomplishments to be proud of, and we derive a sense of satisfaction because of our unit's accomplishments. And that, in turn, kind of motivates our ego a little bit, right? And so that's a really good thing to keep in mind. Humility is a piece of this that we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about and how we look at ego. But humility is defined as a modest or low view of one's own importance. I made some underlines here because typically when people hear the word humility, at least in my experience, they hear a different word than I hear. When most people hear humility, or other people have heard humility, they hear a low opinion of oneself. That is, artificially lowering your perception of yourself to a point that's unreasonable in a face, like in a way to kind of save face, or in a way to seem humble, right? Make an appearance of humility, whereas humility really is a unassuming or a moderate estimation of one's abilities. Humility is modesty, in my opinion, and appropriate modesty is not an overestimation of your ability or an underestimation of your ability, but a sober, thoughtful estimation of your ability, a reasonable estimation of what you can do and what you can't do, and how to interact and relate with the people around you. And
A
so,
logical one, then.
exactly. I have to hit the nail on the head. It's getting the emotions out of the situation, having a reasonable estimation of the situation. That's the point, and that's what we're going to try to talk about tonight. Is how do we get the baggage of our emotions, the baggage of whatever things are bouncing around the back of our head, sometimes unconsciously, out of the way, so we can make logical decisions and consequently better decisions. Is kind of the idea. And so as we work through this, I'm going to pause intermittently, especially because I want to continually get Dark and Avidus's feedback. Definitely at the end of each of these slides, we're going to do that intermittently through it. So I will pause here and kind of offer you guys a window so I don't monologue all the way through. Any thoughts before we kind of continue here?
Well, I would just say that uh, this might not seem like it's relevant to Foxhole at first glance, but in a leadership sense on the game, there is nothing more important, in my opinion, in a leadership role than managing the ego, because there's a lot of big egos on Foxhole. There's a lot of people with a lot of pride and things like that. So I think this subject is definitely one that anybody that wants to be a decent leader on Foxhole needs to obviously pay attention to this.
I think ego and foxhole is probably one of the most toxic things. Like, unfortunately, we have to endure, playing foxhole. I think a lot of, especially some individuals in the community, have like such an inflated ego that like it oftentimes blinds them, and that's like I think that's like peak of what you don't want is this toxicity of this massive ego that it's just people just laugh at, or it's like, oh, okay, do this because end of the day, having a big ego is like, it's never really a fucking good thing to have. It's
I
just,
mean, I would.
there's a
I,
difference between like pride. This is myself, like like, because it's almost like a blind term of having ego, and then your own pride. Because it's good to have, to be prideful and unsure of yourself. You know what I mean? But
yeah.
it's also like when you get to a point of just like it's just so inflated, it's no longer pride. It's just you just got a fat ass ego. You know what I
I
mean?
mean, what I feel with ego is that it's not something to be shied away from. It's not something that you should not want to have. I mean, it's to have an ego is to be human, in my opinion. So to recognize that you have a big ego is the first challenge, and then learning to manage it is what I would say is a more realistic
Of course,
estimate.
of course.
Yeah,
And what you
But
guys are
it's
because
bouncing
like,
everybody
around,
has an ego.
what you're bouncing around with though, and flirting with is exactly the heart of this matter. Is balance, right? Because you don't if your ego, if you don't have enough of an ego, you're going to be in a difficult situation. And if your ego is too large, it's going to get in your way and you're going to be stepping all over yourself. And so it's finding the balance and centering yourself is the idea. And you guys are all over it here. And you're already kind of moving to the next subject of, why is this possibly a problem? And, and if I could just kind of introduce this for the purposes of continuing the discussion,
Of course, of course.
it's really, and there's so much to consider in this slide alone. I've just given a couple of examples, but really, if we were to think about this, I think that as we consider it, you're going to find the limitless examples of some of the issues of this when you see, ego brought to an extreme or in either direction, right? So an ego that's too high or too low, clearly harmful. If it's too high, you're going to overestimate your capabilities, and you're going to underestimate your enemy, and you're also going to underestimate your allies. I should have included that, but the people that work with you, the people that you depend on, if your big ego's in the way, you're going to underestimate their capabilities, and consequently, you're going to underutilize their capabilities. And when you underutilize the capabilities of your allies, your friends, your teammates, then you are less effective as a leader because you're trying to do too much when people are a lot more capable than you think they are. The delusion that only I can get this done does take hold of people with large egos, and
Yeah,
then
it's
it
taken hold of me several times.
right. And it's one of those things when you think back, you go, gosh, if I had just step back from that situation, let somebody else do it, they can do it. Or even worse, maybe I didn't, like, this goes back to some ownership. Maybe I didn't prepare that person properly to succeed, and then that's my failure, right? You
Yeah,
know, and so there's so many other things that kind of work into that idea. You end up being hostile to good ideas and good relationships, even. Right? So once your ego starts to get in the way and you believe that you're right about everything, you can't be wrong, you can't be challenged, and then suddenly you bow up to people because of who they are and not because of the idea. And so an idea, just because it comes from somebody you don't like, doesn't mean the idea is bad. And we sometimes conflate the two. It's like, I don't like this a-hole, I don't want to listen to what he has to say. But truth is truth, regardless of who speaks it. And getting our emotions out of the way so that we can understand and evaluate that situation independently, that's an important aspect of this. That's some part ego, one part resentment.
I
But
mean, I
yeah,
think that happens a lot within our own ranks, to tell you the truth, because a lot of people are of the assumption that everybody, it's all sunshines and rainbows in 82DK, but we're a big clan, and there's obviously people that aren't too friendly with each other. But I mean, they're obviously still part of the same clan, so they're amicable, but they're still not too friendly with each other. But I've witnessed um, suggestions be brought up by people, and then people who don't like that person, you know, don't consider that idea because of their preconceptions about that person. So I've seen it firsthand happen within our own clan.
I've been victim to it constantly in my life, which is why I'm acutely aware to it. I mean, there are certain people that kind of have driven me crazy, both in professional and gaming context. And whenever sometimes they bring up an idea, and I'm just like, this sob, and I've got this like baggage that I'm dealing with here. When the idea itself isn't the issue, it's the person, right? And I'm too compromised to, and I'm in my again in the context of this discussion here, my ego's starting to get in the way because I believe that I'm better than this guy because I don't like him. Like at the end of the day, that's kind of what it gets down to. I no longer respect that individual. And if I want to really oversimplify it, it does come down to respect. When you lose respect for somebody, then things really start to become an issue. And usually there's a correlation. A loss of respect is also correlated with your ego starting to get in the way. Not always, but it's very very commonly the case.
Yeah, myself, I've been a victim on both ends, and think of I think I've managed it a little bit better, but I've know like it's like there's a certain people that just fucking outright frustrate the fuck out of me to a point where it's just like whatever, like exactly what you're saying is doesn't matter what they say, it's just noise in my ears.
Hmm.
And it's like it's such a big barrier once you realize you have this problem, and to just like I'm gonna take a step back and just okay, because when you because once you lose that inner like I guess the lack of understanding for that person, you start to actually develop a little bit more better empathy, and you actually like, oh, you know what, it was a good idea, you know what I mean? It's like I just need to stop, getting like put my feelings aside and just you know judge the idea for what it is versus the person speaking it.
Let me give you an example of something I think you both will really appreciate because we get this every now and again. Every now and again, we'll get a new recruit into DK that's new to Foxhole, and he comes in and
I
he's
think I know what you're
excited
going to say, and I
and he's
think you're going to take the
enthusiastic.
words right out of my mouth.
He's enthusiastic and he draws up this battle plan. Says, "Guys, I got
Yeah,
this great
yeah,
idea for a naval landing." And we're like, "Oh
yeah,
nope, can't do it. No,
yeah,
it
yeah,
can't be
yeah, yeah.
can't be done. Just table it right here." And that's not a good response. Like, because if and now granted, in fairness, if Doc or Razor said, "Hey guys, I got this great idea for a naval invasion," we'd all groan, but we'd listen. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
but whereas this guy, this is just a sergeant that's not been playing Foxhole long. We don't even give it oxygen. Whereas parts of his plan, here's the thing that's interesting about it, because part of that position that we have is an informed position, because likely there are elements of the plan that aren't going to work or aren't well thought out because he just doesn't know the mechanics of the game. But the essence of his plan, the spirit of his plan, may have some merits to it that
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
we're just discarding entirely because we're throwing the baby out with the
I mean,
bathwater.
what I try to do in that situation, which I've done several times, is when somebody suggests something like that, I walk them through why it's not a good idea. Because they'll say, "Oh, well, we should do this naval landing here because they don't have many defenses and they're weak." I say, "Yes, but you need to look at the situation. Look at your supply line.
Right.
You're going to have to cross two maps with a barge just to get a truck of shirts there. Blah
Mm-hmm.
blah blah. You're going to have to take everything you're going to need with you. You're going to take all your vehicles, and then they start to see
Right.
the immensity of the problem of doing something like that, and then they understand, and it's not that they are put down, because people will suggest something again, but they will understand that, for instance, attacking an enemy backline, the naval landings are a most common suggestion by new people of the game. Not generally because it's something that they think is tactically good, but it's just generally that they want to relive Omaha Beach, in my opinion. But yeah, I think that if you just if you hear plans like that from people that haven't been playing the game too long, just have a look at it. I always try and give ideas the time of day, no matter who says it, really, and I try and look at the possibility of actually getting that done in game. But something like attacking a backline map, it's very easy to see that it's not doable sometimes.
I
I
I want to achieve that ideal. I just miss the mark very commonly with those. Like
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
I've caught myself a couple times going, no, we can't do that, and then I have to come back later. I send the guy and this has happened like in the last month where I sent a guy a DM later and said, listen, I completely shut you down. I'm sorry I did that. You didn't deserve that. And he was very gracious, but I was really rude to the guy. I mean, genuinely rude in the channel with 10 other
yeah.
guys.
Rude by your
Uh,
standards.
well, fair enough, but it was rude. It was rude. Go ahead, Dirk.
it's just like I want to understand the big picture, but the example you're painting, you're pretty sure 100% you're gonna know my fucking response on this, but it's like I still can't see. Maybe it's just again that blind, like that blind wall right now that's just preventing me from seeing it. But it's like you got to earn your stripes, man, before you fucking start saying shit. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's just my 2 cents
Mm.
on the situation. I can't like it's just my always my fair opinion. It's like I'll treat you the same, like no matter what. In the end of the day,
I
unfortunately,
would
a
say
rip is a rip.
generally, the people that suggest stuff like that are young, and it's a lot easier to manage your ego when you're older than it is when you're younger, especially when you're a teenage male. It's extremely fucking hard to manage your ego when you're a teenager. So
Go ahead, Dirk.
Oh yeah, but I'm just going with like the newer people that come in, and it's like it's nothing personal, it's nothing against people coming in, but it's like the stigma of people just outright coming in, and their big plans is to I'm gonna take this whole massive organization and have them do this, and
Yeah.
it's like, sorry, I'm not
Yeah.
trying to trash your idea, but reality, we don't work like that. We don't just bend the whim on whoever comes in and throws an idea out, and
Right.
it's like, it's just, to me, I can't see it. I mean, I know I'm trying my best with this, but I cannot.
Well, and you're right. So we are not going to hand the wheel over to the newest guy that comes in, because at the same time, again, we're talking about a proper balance, right? So in one hand, we don't want to become overbearing and we don't want to close our mind to ideas. But in the other hand, we do have our strategies and our tactics are informed by experience, and we have every reason to stand on those experiences for logical reasons that we have tested a lot of these things. And yes, we can consider this idea. And yes, Stark, that we're not going to hand over the wheels of control to somebody that just joined our group, no matter how competent they are. Just because of you kind of have to earn the right to lead, so to speak, and a part of demonstrating that you're able to lead is demonstrating that you know how to follow. And that's what it is for me. Is it not necessarily that you're new and that your ideas aren't great, but good leadership technique starts with being able to follow first. And if you're so impatient and so cocky coming into the gate, you're going to hurt a lot of relationships. And your ability to lead in an environment like this, when you're trying to rush through it, so to speak, and you're not demonstrating good technique as a follower, is going to make you ineffective in the long run anyway. It's not to your benefit or to your good, and it's not to our good. And that's, I think, maybe putting a little bit more legs kind of behind how you're feeling there.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit, because this is not something you traditionally think about when you talk about ego problems and ego management. But I would argue, especially for a lot of younger guys and a lot of newer guys, that struggling with a low ego is actually quite problematic as well. And sometimes it's a little less obvious that that's a struggle and something that you're having to fight through. And I want to kind of continue to define our terms, continue to think about this, because you can have areas of different self-esteem or ego depending on where you're functioning, right? So, like, again, in the gaming world, you might have a really strong ego because you're very good, you're very strong. But if I put you in a different environment where you're uncomfortable and unfamiliar, then you're going to probably be a little bit more meek and a little bit more humble because you're out of your element, you're out of your comfort zone. And so we have areas where we have more confidence and less confidence, and that manifests itself sometimes as what I'm going to call a low or a high ego. And that is very, very evident in Foxhole. I remember when I was kind of a Kriegsman junior officer in DK, kind of learning the ropes, I was pretty confident in my leadership capabilities, but I was very uncomfortable and very, very self-conscious about my in-game competency and in-game knowledge. And so as a result, some of the things that I'm going to talk about kind of in that low ego zone, if I could call it that, are not necessarily mistakes that I made. I think some of them were mistakes, but they were definitely tendencies I had because of a certain level of self-consciousness about my lack of full awareness about all the mechanics of the game. And so it's one of those things that you want to be mindful of, because if you let those things creep in, and it's good to kind of, again, moderate yourself and think very carefully about what you know and what you don't know, but you can extend into that humble space and not do what you need to do to succeed. And I think Avidus and Dark were kind of talking about this earlier, and why it's good to have a high ego and a strong ego is one of the things that you see from really good players in general is, for good or for ill, they're decisive, right? Like, a lot of players that are veterans to the game, they may make a bad call or a bad decision, but they commit to it and they make the best out of it. And that's one, like, with a lot of newer players or hesitant players, and certainly players that are not confident, they hesitate or they change gears or they shift gears. They don't commit to whatever it is. And I think I would rather commit to a mediocre plan than vacillate on a good plan. I think that's something very interesting. Confidence is such a powerful tool, and that's one thing that people with high ego don't struggle with. But if you got a low ego, you do struggle with it, and it affects your performance in a lot of ways. And you find that your first instincts, when you are generally speaking not bad, but you hesitate, you second guess yourself, you question yourself, and it puts you in a difficult posture where you underestimate your capabilities. At the end of the day, you end up overestimating your enemies, and you can be very vulnerable to follow poor examples and bad ideas as a result, because you're looking for a lifeline to bail you out of the uncertainty that you're wrestling with and feeling with. And we'll talk more about this because it's something that I'm not going to spend all of our time here on this slide, because it is a subject worth exploring and thinking about. And how do you identify that within yourself, and then how do you grow out of it, and then how do you do the same for the people that you're leading? Because there are people in DK today that have, and I'm going to say officers even, especially junior officers, that are very uncertain, very tentative about things, and are going to demonstrate some of these tendencies because they're not confident yet.
I would say, in fact, that during my time as an officer, and seeing officers come through the ranks, I would say more often than not, having a low ego is more of a problem than having an over the top ego.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like you just said there, people by and large don't take command. That, like you said, they're not decisive, and that is one of the biggest frustrations when training new officers. They're not decisive in their actions. They're afraid to take command of squads, especially when it's like uh, younger people that have obviously been in the clan for a few years, and then somebody older joins the clan and a rip the below them. It can be quite intimidating for a younger person to tell an older person what to do, even if it is on a video game.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
that all plays into it, in my opinion.
Dark.
I see exactly where he's coming from saying that as well, because I see that a lot of time with a lot of the younger officers, or not just saying of age, but like the newer officers or Kriegsmen that come in that kind of just feel like I don't want to step on any toes. You know what I mean? Like if, like for example, if a Kriegsman is in a squad with an officer, they kind of feel like, oh, maybe I should just let him or let them lead, and I'll just chill out. But it's like in hindsight, just don't be afraid to y- like if you want to take charge, you always have that table to ask. You know what I mean? Like you should never feel intimidated, or unless it was already made clear that this person is leading something, give them that respect. But if I mean, sometimes if you just see organized chaos, don't just remember we're in a clan that survives on being organized. If you want to reorganize the squad, you have that authority to just like, hey guys, let's all regroup at the town hall, and do this and do that to make this
Mm-hmm.
essentially the same channel of randoms into an actual DK squad.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's go ahead and start putting some meat on the bones here. Let's talk about first of all. So we're going to divide this into 4 sections to kind of to finish off our stream tonight. The first section is going to be managing your own ego if you've got a large ego and you see signs of a large ego, and the second is going to be managing your ego if you got a low ego. How can you detect it and what can you do about it? And then we'll conclude it with the other half of the equation. As a leader, when you detect a large ego in your squad, what should you do about it? How can you lead those guys? And then we'll finalize it with, once again, if you see low ego, you detect guys with a low ego in your squad or in your chain of command. How then do you help those guys succeed? How do you work around some of the strengths and weaknesses of that situation? Okay, so that'll be kind of the outline that I want to work through, and we're going to dive right into, I think, what most people expected us to talk mostly about is how to manage a large ego. Like if you've got a large ego, first of all, what are some signs of it, right? And there are a lot of different signs. I've picked out just a few here to kind of generate some discussion. But somebody else got promoted and recognized. You don't feel that they deserve it. You need to check yourself. Why do you feel that way? What is the reason? Maybe there is a legitimate reason. I'm not saying there isn't. Sometimes people get promoted without just cause, but you need to understand why. And you need to at least open your mind to the thought that maybe it's just envy. Maybe your ego's taking a hit because you felt you deserve that promotion over them, and you need to at least clear that in your head. If you're starting to feel that. Now, if there is a legitimate reason, bring it up, logically approach it, get your emotions out of the way, and deal with it. But you want to be careful when you see stuff like that. You'll notice that a lot of these things have a theme of you getting annoyed, you starting to get frustrated, right? When you see your emotions starting to get involved in a situation, that's a tell. When you start getting emotional about a matter, that's a tell that something's going on beneath the surface that you're not necessarily being fully rational about. Because those emotions, generally speaking, you want to follow them. They're good guides. They're good guideposts to let you know that there's a possible issue. But they're a guidepost to issues within yourself just as much as there's a guidepost to issues within other people. And you have to be cognizant of that. You become annoyed when someone questions your decisions, your ideas. And so once again, you've got an idea, you got a plan, and somebody starts to poke holes in it. That can get frustrating, especially if it's somebody that you don't respect. And so you got to check that, right? As we already talked about before, if it's somebody that brings up an issue with your plan, and you already got an existing relationship with that guy that's less than good, and you're gonna bow up on that, and you're gonna become disagreeable about that. Check your ego first. Take a step
I
back.
mean, you can literally put Avitus in brackets after that line, to tell you the truth.
Check yourself.
And I think that's fair. I have, and Avidus, I think, has been very free and open about this. On occasion, Avidus has had some difficult conversations every now and again with Rips that he felt has been disrespectful, and the Rip just thought he was participating in the conversation. He wasn't trying to be disrespectful, but from Avidus' perspective, he was being disrespectful. And I think there are merits to both of those things.
It's been a challenge to get my ego under control. I think I have got better at it over time, but my ego was fueled primarily by my pride in the clan, and that started to like inflate my ego to such a degree that I wasn't being very pleasant. So I had to check that, and I'm doing a bit better with it now.
You get annoyed when somebody else takes the credit. This is a hard one sometimes, and this is, I mean, we don't really see this. I actually do see it in games every now and again where somebody takes the credit for an operation, or you had a maneuver, or you had a successful battle, and suddenly somebody celebrates, and it's like, that's not their victory, that's my victory. Well, check your ego, man. It's a team's victory. We're all in this together. Let everybody celebrate. Let everybody enjoy the win. So check your ego. It doesn't matter who gets the credit for it. If you've got self-assurance and self-confidence, if you're centered in yourself and you don't need the approval of others to feel good about your contributions, you got that balanced, modest perspective, you don't need the praise. In fact, if I want to take this to a leadership context, I'm going to put a very simple principle in place. When the team wins, your guys get recognized. When the team loses, you take the blame. That's a very simple rule that you can follow. And that can be kind of harsh, especially if you're not experienced with that, you're not related to that. But if you apply that attitude as a leader, you're going to find that you build very good relationships with your guys, number one. And number two, you're going to be finding a lot of opportunities for improvement, because there are things that go wrong that may not be, quote unquote, directly your fault, but since it happened in your chain of command, you're still responsible for that. And you should have trained that person better. You should have anticipated that issue in advance and done something about it to intercede. There's something that you could have done if you were wiser, smarter, if you had known your team better, if you had analyzed the situation better. You can own those situations, and you don't have to worry about this. You can freely give credit to everybody else because you're centered within yourself and you're self-confident enough to do so. And then last but not least, you think everyone around you is an idiot. This is a big tell. This is a huge tell, actually. And it's arguably, in my opinion, one of the most dangerous ones, because this is the center of disrespect. Both in the people that you play with, people that you work with, and the people that you compete against. And you can argue about which of those parties is the most threatening. But I'll tell you, we as DK, as a unit, have suffered by disrespecting our enemy on occasion. And there have been some times where we've had an operation, and sometimes the operation didn't even go bad. It just didn't go as well as it could have. Well, we've kind of had to sit back and say, you know what, this plan was, we didn't use these words, but this plan was disrespectful to the enemy. This plan was ambitious, perhaps, or this was really optimistic, but ultimately it was disrespectful to the enemy. We did not respect the enemy's capabilities. We underestimated him, and that was a little bit of our ego getting away. We're the big
definitely.
bad DK. We've done ops for years, and we've been crushing colonials under our heel. We can get away with anything. And the Collies are not dumb. They are not bad players, and they put and we see every Saturday the best the colonials have to offer, and they're good. And it is good for us to respect our opponents and understand that those guys are capable. They're capable of surprising us. They're capable of catching us without our guards, and they're capable of beating us. And if we keep that in the top of our mind, then our plans and our preparations and our maneuvers will be respectful of the enemy. And you bring that down to a tactical context, and you see these kind of mistakes happen all the time with really cocky squad leaders that will sometimes take a squad of guys and try to take an objective that they have no business trying to take. That if they just assess the situation and done a little bit of quick math or done a little bit of assessment of the enemy's strength, they'd realize that my 7 infantry are not going to break that defensive line of 14 guys. It just isn't going to happen. So what am I going to do about that situation? How am I going to maneuver in that environment? How am I going to humble myself a little bit, not believe that I'm going to take these guys on 2-to-1s cleanly, and play smarter? And so be careful about thinking everybody around you is an idiot or everybody else is weaker than you, not as intelligent as you. People are just as smart as you. In fact, it's probably safer to assume they're probably smarter than you are in many other contexts, and it's going to require your focus, your attention, your time, and your energy to outmaneuver and outwit that guy to win, because you need to respect him. And your allies are equally capable if you empower them in the right way, you train them in the right way, you give them the right tools, materials, equipment, knowledge, support. They can do well as well. They can do just as well, in fact, probably better than you if equipped properly and you lead them properly, instead of just trying to do everything for them or assuming that they can't do it. And so definitely respect your enemies and respect your teammates. Step back from the situation and emotions and look at that bigger picture. Again, instead of looking at that green line and saying, I'm going to crush that line because I'm God's gift to the universe. I'm the best infantry players ever played this game. And I'm going to win this fight by shadow dancing my way through bullets. Well, you might do that one time in 10, But the other 9 times in 10, you're just throwing your life away and throwing shirts away and throwing your squad away if you're leading the squad in that situation. And so if you had taken a step back and looked at the situation, counted the enemy, counted your resources, realized that maybe you just need to get some arty on deck. Maybe a good old-fashioned flank would do a lot of good there. Maybe you need to coordinate with another rifle team to double your manpower so you can effectively engage that target. Don't get cocky. Assess the situation with a sober mind, with a level head, and make a good decision with that. And tactically, if you can, when you step back and think, the battlefield, like the fog of war, clears up a little bit when you can do that. And then last but not least, you want to empathize with other people and try to see the world from their shoes, both, again, in relation to your allies and from your enemy's perspective, right? So from an ally's perspective, how are they, and we've talked about this really in everything that we've taught, in how you lead and how you train other people and work with other people, is to empathize. First and foremost, try to figure out where they're coming from, because if you can figure out where they're coming from, you can better form a response to help influence that. And so, as Avidus was mentioned before, if he's going to talk with this Rip about this idea for his naval invasion, well, he needs to kind of make sure he understands what the Rip's trying to do at first. And maybe what he's trying to do doesn't make any sense, but maybe, just maybe, with a slight alteration, that plan starts to take on a little bit more life, because, hey, this idea is not completely lost. Instead of doing this naval invasion 2 maps away, what if we did a naval invasion that landed on the flank of this front here, and we would link up with the main line of advance? That could work, man. This could maybe come together. And so when we empathize and we see things through, maybe we can see what this guy's trying to get at and see an opportunity. And then with your enemies, this is even more valuable, because if you can put yourself in your enemy's shoes for a minute, you can see the same strategic opportunities that you might miss because you are over
Evaluating.
over evaluating your own capabilities and your own strengths. And so if you're looking at the map from the enemy's perspective, you see you got this long undefended Logi line, you got a problem. You know what I'm saying?
I would say, actually a couple of things there. In regards to people, members of your squad, even if you pick up that someone's quiet, or you pick up that someone has a bit of a low ego, or they're not confident or something like that, then it's much easier to affect somebody else's ego and how the rest of the squad view that person. If you call that person out for a good action, say for instance they take a really good shot, or they flank an enemy with a bayonet and kill him or something like that, call that out instantly and over exaggerate the fact that they've done an excellent play.
Right.
So the rest of the squad can then see that person, and that person's ego can go up a little bit from where it was.
And we'll get into that in a minute, because you're spot on. Using recognition is an excellent tool. You don't want to what's the word I'm looking for? Pander to people, but you can recognize people in good faith.
I would never ever suggest pandering to somebody. Never ever pander. But when they do something correct, make sure that you call it out, and make sure that people recognize that they've done something good, because that means that that will burn into their minds, and they'll attempt to do things like that in the future. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I think that's a great thing. The second thing that I was going to say in regards to viewing things from your enemy's point of view, I would say that is probably the most underrated skill to have as an officer in Foxhole. Like, to be able to instinctively know what is going to happen on the fly is very, very niche, and it only happens when you've been playing the game for years. You know what I mean? Certain things can happen on a front line, and I can tell what's going to happen next just by what's going on around me. So, for instance, if I see we've pushed armor up, but then their armor pulls back, for instance, or something like that. Or a better example would be I get shot. This happened the other day, exactly. This happened the other day. This is a good example. I got shot. I was down. A medic is looking at me. He's eyeing me from behind these sandbags. And I said to him on voice, I said, "Don't do it, dude," because I just died to a grenade launcher. I said, "Don't do it, dude. Don't do it." But he didn't listen to me, and he ran out from behind those sandbags and tried to res me, bless him. But then that grenade landed, and he couldn't get away, and we both died. You know what I mean? So, like, being able to just that's the most basic example, but being able to see something like that is like it's a not just for squad leading but for gameplay in general on Foxhole is a huge skill. And try and put yourself in the enemy's shoes. Try and think to yourself, if this was happening to me right now, what would I be trying to do? You know what I mean?
Right.
I would be trying to go for the flanks or something like that. So that's when you look on your radio and you might see a couple of colonials on the radio. Ah, those are the veterans. You know what I mean? Because those are the people that are thinking like me. You know what I mean? So you start to build up a picture already without even engaging these people. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
So
And
yeah,
that's a
it's
skill.
a big skill.
It's a
Yeah,
skill. I
huge
mean,
skill.
we call it's. I mean, I think it's affectionately called game sense. At the end of the day, like a lot of people have
Yeah,
who
yeah,
have really strong game sense. Like your best competitors, wherever you look in the gaming world, are strong competitors because they're strong mechanically, but their game sense is off the charts. Like they anticipate the maneuvers of their enemies so well because they're thinking in that space in that strategic environment. And so couldn't be more. Moving on, let's talk about having a modest ego. So let's say that you identify, you may not even be aware of this. A lot of people don't even have the self awareness to know that they've got a really modest ego and they may need to uh, dial it up a notch. And so there are some things that you can do about it, but some things that you need to watch out for. When you need to check your ego in the different sense is you think no matter what you do, you can't win. You're defeated all the time. You're losing all the time. Your performance is poor. And what happens is you start to get a defeatist attitude, and you've lost the battle before the conflict has even begun. And we talked about this on the very first podcast when we were talking about how to improve and the nature of self improvement. It's worth repeating though, is that you get in your own head and you start to lose fights for reasons that are irrelevant because you've got excuses prepared because in your mind due to the fact or the to the belief that you can't win. And we used the example before. I would use it again very briefly of looking at the warden response to the mortar half track in the very first war it was introduced. We had a lot of wardens that got rolled over by the mortar half track, and they were just like, it's too strong. There's nothing we can do about it. We can't win. And as a result, a lot of excuses were made for poor play, poor decisions, poor tactical engagements, and failings. And they didn't assess the poor decisions that were made tactically. They just drew the conclusion the mortar half track is indefeatable. And that's a bad attitude that's going to prevent you from improving, that's going to prevent you from winning. Similar context, the whole Silverhand debacle that we're dealing with right now, the Colonials are making the same mistake. Now, I want to be exceptionally clear here. I believe both these vehicles are strong tools that give the enemy a decisive advantage that is difficult to overcome. That's not what
yeah.
I'm trying to argue.
Agreed.
But I am arguing that you are defeating yourself before the conflict's even begun because you believe it's stronger than perhaps it really is. It's
Yeah.
strong. It's difficult
This
to kill. It's difficult to maneuver against. It's difficult to fight. But it doesn't mean that every single conflict that you lost was because of that tool. Maybe you did lose because of that tool in some cases, but not in every case, and it does not excuse you from all of your tactical mistakes and all of your strategic mistakes that have been made. All of us are guilty of doing this. I'm not trying to pick on the Colonials. I'm not trying to pick on Wardens. I'm just picking on us as people because we all do this, and those are two examples that are prominent right now. But this is kind of riddled into places all over the place, and we all go through periods of this where we are defeated in our own mind before the battle's even started. Go ahead, Evis.
I mean, I would say that something that I've brought up recently with this whole vehicle thing. I've said this time and time again. I would welcome if the silver hand gets nerfed, the silver hand gets nerfed. It doesn't bother me at all at this point. It doesn't bother me because what I would actually like to see is I would like to see that the colonials be stronger than us. So we have an uphill fight, and I really want that. And I think that's something that's quite unique about our faction compared to the colonials, is that we um, tend to get to a point where the colonials would give up. We continue to fight, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that is the biggest difference between our factions because um, we have things that help our ego. Like even for instance, if I mean, I don't want to bring it up yet again, but it is a massive influencing factor, the fact that we have something to get behind. Even if it is just a made up character, we do have something to get behind that helps our ego. Even in defeat, we see victory in defeat. Do you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Because when dying is your goal, then you can never lose.
Well, yeah, and I get that. I will say that I think that's informed in part because a lot of our fact, and this has been brought up, and I think they're correct to bring this up. that many members of our faction perceive that we have a late game strength, just in the tools and equipment that we have available to us. And many of them play in that environment, and the Colonials perceive that as well. Not just Colonial vets, but the average player perceives it that way. And
I wouldn't say that was down to our vehicles though. I would say that's more down to the fact that our faction just simply seems to do better with combined arms overall than the Colonials.
Well, I mean, neither here nor there. There's a belief that this part of the war is where we excel, and it's been that. And I agree with you. It's been that to extent. It's been that way to some extent for a long time. But in this most recent war, there is a perception on both sides that all right, we have this late game advantage now in vehicles. Both, if you want to say in experience, I'll concede that for now, just for sake of argument. But definitely in material, and I do agree that whether it's balanced or imbalanced, I'm not going to make that point, but it is perceived as imbalanced. And that perception is well found to the extent that it is much easier, I think, and I don't think there's any argument made about this, it is much easier to use a silver hand than it is to use a mortar half-track or to use the Colonial Light Tank. And as a result, the average player is going to overperform in that environment with the silver hand compared to the other tool available. And then you multiply that out across the hundreds of players playing, and you have the Colonials losing more frequently than they're winning in those engagements.
Yeah.
And so again, I don't. This is not on topic at all, but I just wanted to kind of get that out there for a moment. Coming back to this, managing a modest ego. If you detect these kind of things within yourself, check yourself. You're afraid to share your opinion or speak out in the group. This is a big tell. Again, if I'm looking at some of our junior officers here, some of this I think we have to own as even senior leaders, that we may create an environment that maybe is difficult to speak in for whatever the reason. So maybe we need to own that a little bit. But at the end of the day, if you're feeling a certain degree of anxiety or apprehension about speaking up, sharing your opinion, then chances are you're not confident about what you have to say, or you're not confident that it's going to be received well for whatever the reason. And you've got to wrestle with that and maybe determine exactly the source of that. Maybe that's because you're not confident. Maybe that's because you don't have that self-assurance, or maybe the environment itself is instigating that feeling, if you will. And then last but not least on this list anyway, hesitance to make decisions or looking for support for your decisions. This comes back to initiative. Again, kind of from officers and also from riflemen. The hesitation in making decisions, or always looking for somebody to tell you what to do, or always looking for somebody to back you up on a decision you're trying to make, is a sign that you aren't confident. It's a sign that your ego may be a little low in this domain. And that's very natural and normal, I think, for a junior officer and a new leader. I went through that significantly. Like, I was extremely self-conscious when I first started leading in this game. And, I wanted somebody to kind of check me, check my argument, check my reasoning. I would try to do that after the fact. I try to make a decision, then after I debrief, say, okay, take a look at what the decisions I made. Help me understand this. Was this a sound call? If not, why not? And then for that purpose, I wasn't necessarily having a low ego.
I
was trying to learn more than
I
anything
remember
else.
you messaging me several times after ops, wanting constructive feedback. I do remember that.
Yeah, I was manic about it. And I want to thank you, and I want to thank Holland. Holland spent a lot of time with you, kind of going back and analyzing stuff that we had, decisions that were made. And people have been very generous as I've been trying to learn LC. But you guys will remember as well, for some of you that have been around, when I first started to pick up the LC responsibilities, I was annoying about asking for feedback because I wanted to know where I was going wrong or where I was going sideways. And I think that was a little bit insecurity, if I'm going to be real, because I was very self-conscious about it. I wasn't confident in the space, and I wanted to grow and I wanted to do better. And it manifested itself on some occasions as indecisiveness. And I remember distinctly some operations where we had situations come up that I wasn't prepared for. I didn't have experience in the domain, and I didn't know what the best call was, and so I vacillated. It was very hard for me to kind of make a call, and we suffer for that. The squad suffers. But you know what? People were very gracious. I've been imperfect as a squad leader. I've been imperfect as an LC. And for all my failings and for all my shortcomings, for all the things that we've had kind of go sideways on us, people have been exceptionally gracious, and I haven't been crucified yet, so that's good. Grateful for that.
And look at you now, you're training me.
But but the bottom line is, notice that in yourself and then grow. Find ways to grow. Get that feedback if you feel that's what you need. Study, practice, train, and prepare to succeed is how you get through this. Because, and generally speaking, when you're looking at having a modest ego, there's some facet of your performance that you're underperforming in. Maybe it's mechanical. Maybe it's decision making, maybe it's game sense, right? Maybe it's any of those things. But there's something about your performance that you're just a little self conscious about, or you're very uncomfortable with. So you need to go back to the principles of self improvement and work on those things. If you want to get bring your ego back to parity, you've got to become comfortable in whatever it is that's giving you anxiety, whatever it is that you don't feel confident in. And what happens instead for a lot of people is, instead of seeing those opportunities, they start to make excuses for why these things aren't happening. And the excuses are as ridiculous as they are numerous. And they go from the spectrum of, well, I'm just a really unlucky person, to nobody likes me,
Mm.
to the enemy is too
I've heard that
strong.
before.
There's a lot of stuff that kind of comes up from people out of nowhere to try to deflect their own problems, like, because they sense that they're not doing well, and they know that intuitively, and so they, for want of not knowing how to fix it, they come up with all kinds of reasons why. And the unlucky one is probably my favorite, because I hear a lot of people talk, and this is more like as an aligned infantry context, or even just raw gameplay, that people just feel like, gosh, I'm dying all the time, I'm just unlucky. No, you're not
Yeah.
unlucky. You're putting yourself in bad situations. You don't realize it. You increase the probability that you were going to die by standing in a location that enemy was going to howitzer. So you're
Yeah.
surprised that you eat a howitzer shell because you're always standing in a place the enemy wants to howitzer. You're surprised that you're the first one to die in a rifle fight because you're probably 5 meters ahead of the rest of the squad more commonly than you realize.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's a
and
big one for me. I'm always the first one to die.
well, and I get there too. Like, it's
Yeah.
it's it's bad habits that we train, because in a lot of my other gaming experience, playing tactical shooters, I'm the entry fragger. I'm the first one to kick the door in and
Yeah.
try to get that entry frag. And sometimes I play Foxhole that way, and that's bad technique in Foxhole.
Well, what it tends to be with me is that I don't like it's a big problem with me is where I don't really have the confidence in other people to lead the squad into where they need to be. So
Right.
most of the time, I end up leading the squad in myself. So I'm the first man in the formation leading them in. I'm the first one to get murked as soon as we get
Yeah.
to the town. So that tends to be what happens with me. So that's
One thing I found
why I
really
try to
valuable,
introduce.
and this is so niche to this very specific situation, um, but in the rifle team, especially since we have the privilege of having a lot of new guys that are learning to lead and growing as junior leaders right now in DK, is I like to have somebody that's kind of on binos in the second row of the squad that's directing the squad movements. Maybe that's me, maybe that's Fancy, maybe that's Big Null, but it's somebody. And then I've got one of the other officers actually leading the line formation. And so one of us is giving the strategic direction, and the other is giving the tactical direction. So when that tactical leader dies on the front, there's still somebody giving the strategic direction of the squad so it can still perform.
Yeah.
And that's been really effective. Um, just from my perspective, because I've seen it like you have.
It would be incredibly hard to play Foxhole for me now without our chain of command in place.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, it really demands it for you to take it to that next level and sustain. Because like
Does,
you,
yeah.
in the very early iterations of our infantry gameplay, you're absolutely right. We had it kind of on one guy. He was the center of the line formation, and if he went down, the whole formation collapsed into small guys just trying to survive, and the coordination kind of fell apart. And it would almost always demand a regroup. Whereas if you can have a chain of command where things fall back to. And that really started in earnest when I first started working with you as a junior officer, I think, because
Yeah,
we were
it
really
it
doing
would.
that well.
I would say that when we came up with the different infantry sections was when it really changed and when rank structure became a real important thing in DK, because it was just getting to the point where our size was too large not to have one. And I think we've done incredibly well. We've came a hell of a long way since we introduced it, and it's really been to our benefit over the past, I'd say, 40 odd wars. It's been absolutely excellent.
But to begin bringing at least this slide to a close, what I want you to open your mind to as a person, every single person listening to this and thinking about this, is don't be too proud to not recognize when you're maybe a little meek, you may be a little lowly and a little bit modest, and you might need to step up your game, because nobody wants to say they have a low ego. Like nobody wants to admit that, or that they are weak or something crazy like that.
Yeah,
But if you're really honest with yourself, there are places in your life right now that you got a little bit of a weak ego, because and you're struggling to figure out what you need to do about it. Maybe it's in gaming context, maybe it's in a professional context, maybe it's in a personal context. You got a relationship that you're really struggling with right now, and what is it that's holding you back? Because chances are you got some influence over that situation if you're willing to open your mind up enough, if you're willing to be vulnerable long enough for you to be able to assess that opportunity. And the beauty of being vulnerable and assessing and understanding that vulnerability is there is a solution. You can work on that. You're not victim to that. You're not a captive to that. The only thing that's holding you hostage is your own pride preventing you from acknowledging it as a problem to begin with. So you got to be able to humble yourself enough to realize that maybe you got an issue here, maybe you got room for development, and then challenge yourself to grow. And then even in the context of people that are very solid, very, very centered, understood, you still got growing to do. And so, even if you're stable, you've still got to, again, humble yourself enough to see those growth opportunities and see how you can be better, how you can be more precise. Because there's nothing more frightening than getting content with where you're at. Because when you're not growing, you're dying. And when you're not growing, the enemy's growing and they're getting better. And so do not become content in your position of authority, even if you're at the top of your game, because you've always got room for improvement. And as you stand on the top, somebody's trying to maneuver against you to cut your legs out from you under you. You're getting countered without you even realizing it. And so you got to be ready and able to respond to those threats and nimble on your feet, always improving, always watching out, always getting better, always getting stronger. Good.
I think that that all harkens back to if you're watching this, then you're already doing that.
Right.
If you're watching these informative video streams, then you're already trying to better yourself as a leader and as an officer. So you're already doing what Kaz is suggesting, and if you're somebody that already that feels as if he knows how to lead, like myself or Zara or something like that, there's always room for improvement. So that's why I watch these streams, and why I'm getting involved now is because it's such a good thing to assess yourself and to grow as an officer, and as a person, to try and better yourself, and to try and be more efficient and effective for the clan as a whole, or for your relevant thing.
You can use this practically for both, personal life and as well as your own leisure gaming or even your professional fields, because like nothing is better than sorry, I try to come in trying to do something but I absolutely fucking train wrecked. Sorry.
Yeah,
You're all right.
it's all right, dude.
You're good, brother. You're good, but you're on point though,
No,
100%.
but thank you. Well, just wanted to say just bouncing off what Avidus was saying, like if you see like the streams and like we have the title of it, and there are some people here where they click on it and they read it and it's like, you know what, this is dumb. I'm gonna click out. 9 out of 10 times, you know what? If you thought like that, then there's probably there's an ego there that you know what I mean. And we're not trying to say that these TED talks or these streams are like
If you
are the
don't watch
best thing out there.
our stream, you got an ego, boy.
But pretty much, but in the sense of way too is like like Kaz is just doing these just straight out of like his passion, and it's like you don't get these type of like talks anywhere. Like where are you gonna find someone that's willing and enthusiastic to tell you and teach you how to like like manage, like for example here, like manage your ego. And it's just, to me, it's just phenomenal. That's why most of the time I don't even speak, because I just want to like
Absorb
hear
it.
him what he has to say. Exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry too, I'm like out of breath. I just had to chase my dog like fucking. Sorry,
Is that
sorry.
where you went?
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta go chase him. He just running down the hill.
Oh my gosh. Let's move on to the last section here because we've got probably about 6 minutes left if we want to try to keep it on the hour just for the wrap up. And we do want to talk about leading egos. And so as a leader, then when you sense, because you're gonna lead people that got ego issues, either on the high side or the low side. And so a couple tips, a couple things that you can keep in mind that can help you work with personalities to help them be successful. And I want to be very, very clear. I've mentioned this very frequently because it's important to emphasize. These tactics and these techniques are designed in the spirit of respect and support, not manipulation. Okay? Because a lot of people misfire on this and look at it, oh, I just need the strategy that I can kind of flank around the side of this guy and get him to do what I want to do. No, that's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to help people grow. We're trying to help people be better. We're trying to help them for their own benefit, not your own, right? Like it's not about you. It's about them. And sometimes you got to give people what they need, and you got to approach them from a way that's respectful. And when you come at it that way, it's a much better perspective. And when your goal is to be respectful, when your goal is to be gentle and kind and helpful, then you'll find that the tactics that follow are geared that way. And so I want to say that these tactics are geared in that spirit. So with that being said, again, if somebody's got a strong ego, and you got somebody in your squad or somebody in your chain of command that's got a strong ego, give them responsibility. Chances are, people, generally speaking, people that have a strong ego because it's founded in pride, and pride is founded in achievement and accomplishments. And so, without getting too deep, generally speaking, strong ego is grounded in some kind of loose reality. Sometimes not. Sometimes it's hopelessly misapplied. But generally speaking, there's some capability there that they have some reason to be proud. They have some reason to be distinguished. So play to their strengths. Give them responsibility that may be even larger than they can handle. And that will give them either an opportunity to learn some humility, or you're going to knock it out of the park and your team is going to succeed because you've got a high performer that's just killing it in a domain that maybe somebody else isn't as strong to perform in. And even as a squad leader, as a rifle team leader, I got certain guys in my squad that are very talented individual infantry players, and sometimes are a little difficult to keep on task because they see, and it's not because they're like anything other than high performers. They see opportunities and they go for them. They take initiative, but sometimes that initiative is not consistent with the global plan, and it hurts the squad's objective, even though they're just murdering people in some other domain.
Yeah,
and so if I can challenge that, if I can channel that strength to a place in my line where I need the most support, like I've taken situations where I'm looking at the line of scrimmage that I'm getting ready to have to deal with, and I plant people my really strong players in the most difficult places, and we win more frequently in those domains than we might in different situations. Go ahead, Avidus.
I mean, I've lost count of the times where I mean, just to name a few names, people like Clockwise, people like Maybar,
Bjorn.
Coolburn, Bjorn, Arendt is a big one when he's around. Like those types of people, when they're in my squad or in my voice channel or something like that, and I notice they're not with the squad, I am not worried whatsoever, because I've learned over the years that those types of people, if they're off and they're not with the squad, then generally 99 times out of 100, they're doing something ridiculously
Productive.
memey, but it'll be something to the effect of, "Where the hell are you, Colburn? Oh, well, I've just stole a battle tank. I'm driving it back to our base."
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's hard to be angry with someone when they're out of position, but they're bringing a battle tank back to the base.
But here's the deal. I really want to touch on this for a second, so I'm going to beg your mercy to kind of jump on this.
Of course, yeah.
That play is incredible. It's still the wrong play, and that is such a hard lesson to think about and to understand.
Yeah.
Because in that situation, they won, but they won through really bad technique at the end of the day. And so what happens the other 95 times they go for that play and you didn't have them in the rifle line? And so the failure is not theirs, though. If I'm going to come back to that idea, when you fail to channel that resource properly, that's your fault. That's not Bjorn's fault. That's not Coolburn's fault. That's not Clockwise's fault. I mean, that's your fault as a leader, because that individual, this high performer, this wrecking ball, felt that his objective was superior to the objective that was assigned to the squad, and he was going to go chase that. And we failed to impress on that guy that his strength and talent was needed in pursuit of the objective that we had right there, or we frankly didn't leverage them enough. So again, on the flip side, it's absolutely fine to consult some of these high performers. So like I have the privilege of working with Vininsky in my squad every now and then. And my strategy with Vininsky is I typically give him a rifle team, say, what do you think? What do you see an opportunity? Because Vaughn has an eye for the battlefield that is superior to most people that I know, and he sees opportunities that it will take me 20, 30 minutes to observe.
Yeah.
And so what do? I don't let my ego get in the way that, well, this is my squad, I'm not going to let Vaughn lead over me. No, I let him lead because he's a leader. He's a darn good leader. He's a very competent battlefield tactician. Use those people, right? Leverage those opportunities. Give them responsibility, because Vaughn's got a large ego. I'm very free and open to say that, both from a competence perspective, and he's very proud of his ability. I'm okay with that. I can work with that, man, and turn him loose instead. Don't cripple the guy. Don't go into a battle with him trying to make him conform to your style. Use that and leverage that. And so find those opportunities for your really high performers, for your big people with large egos, and give them responsibility, and they're gonna deliver. When I give Vaughn, instead of putting Vaughn as a rifle team, when I give Vaughn two other guys and make him a rifle team out of those guys and say, I need you to go do this objective, it gets done. I don't care what it is. It could be impossible. He finds a way to get it done. And it's just one of those things. And so finding those opportunities, like Coolburn's a great example of that as well. If you give Coolburn the right tools and the right manpower, he's going to get some stuff done. And it, so use those people, use those awesome guys to their strengths. Let them play their strengths.
I mean, the way that I've always thought about it, and this is going to sound a bit silly, but I see when I've got a squad to command, I see them as resources
Sure.
to like when in a tactical sense. So when I want to commit my squad to a certain task, I will look at spending those resources on that task. However, the way that I look at people like the people that we mentioned, these people that are super veterans at the game, where they're really, really good at the game and they know how to get around things and steal things and what have you. Um, I look at spending, putting aside a small portion of that resource and
Mm-hmm.
gambling it away,
Sure.
because even though yes, technically, you're failing at getting the entire squad on task. Technically, that's correct. However, the what you're gambling and the potential reward and you get from that far outweighs the tactical relevance of having another rifle on the line, in my opinion.
And I agree. I'm just saying channel that resource instead, right? So
Yeah,
so like again, if you want to, if you think that there's an opportunity, you consult with them in advance. Hey, Coolborn, I need you to go scout this out and see opportunities. Let me know what you see,
yeah,
and then he's going to be empowered to say, "Yo, I've got a scout on a battle tank. I think I can steal it." And then you're
right.
informed about what's going on instead of him driving that battle tank back from that line, and he's already driving it back, and you're just now becoming aware of it.
Yeah,
Then you can start to plan around it better. And so not only does he steal that battle tank and he brings it back, now your position is your squad to cover that retreat because you're informed. There's so
you're
much
right.
more
Yeah,
coordination there, and so I'm just kind of looking at it from that perspective.
It's
yeah. I
also
mean,
like,
yeah. Go
oh,
ahead,
you can
Dan.
go. Okay. It's also like an influential thing as well because like when you have other members as well, like some people are, of course, like they get lucky to get that battle tank, but it also to me it's like, oh, so it's one of those things. It's okay as long as you succeed in it. But
Mm-hmm.
like what you know, Kaz said earlier, yes, it's a win, but it's ultimately a bad habit in the end though.
Mm-hmm.
It's something we don't want to just outright encourage because when like in the same breath, I know what you're talking about when you have these confident individual players, but it's still like like end of the day, unless I give them the okay, like okay, I feel confident, go go out and do that
Mm.
and see if they don't fail or if they do fail and it's like it's all right, you know what I mean, like I gave you the opportunity versus just letting them go out on their own way because in the end of the day you still have to if you're assigned to that squad you're responsible for the individuals and if you just let them go do what they want regardless of their skill
I will
just set
say
them
that
up for success though.
I will say that out of like the hundreds of people that we have in 82 Gear, I can maybe name six individuals that I would give that privilege to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Very, very few people that meet the criteria, well, my criteria for being given that amount of freedom. So it's a very, very rare thing for me to allow
I understand.
someone that level of freedom,
Yeah, and I
because
understand
these
where you're
people
coming from with
are
that.
literally John Rambo in Foxhole. You know what I mean? They go behind enemy lines, they cause some chaos, dude. So I'm more than willing to let them do that.
And again, I understand completely where you're going from because I mean, I'm not gonna lie, they produce results like all the individuals you mentioned, they have that ability and that initiative to just like one of the biggest things, and I know Clock does this as well, where I'm against self spotting, but Clockwise can fucking go take out like this key target without no one even telling him anything. You know what I mean? And it's like it's one of those things. It succeeds, yes, but in the same breath when other people they're like, oh, he's doing it, I'm gonna
Mm.
go do it, I want to
We
make a name
expect
for myself.
everybody to be on that level, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
you get used to that. So when they're not around, you feel a bigger disadvantage than if you had everything uniform.
And here's the other thing: if you're not coordinating that, and this is why I'm so key on making sure that your rogue elements are at least doing those rogue elements in coordination with you. So, because I've had times where I've turned Vaughn loose, and then he's completed a secondary objective, and we failed our primary objective because I just needed a few more guys, and I wasn't strong enough to hold my position. And I know for a fact if I'd had his strength and the two strong guys that I left with him, we would have been able to hold that line. And it was just just a slight resource misallocation. But sometimes what you don't need is the flashy plays. You need the consistent plays. It's the same argument that sometimes we don't need DR blowing up safe houses and blowing up town halls. we need them making sure that FA gun doesn't die. It's not flashy, but it's reliable. And I know that that's a huge tilting argument to make, but
Don't make me
but
grumble.
yeah, but you got to look at that though. You got to look at the high percentage plays over the low percentage plays, and this
Yeah.
is where people build really bad habits. And I want to emphasize again: just because something works doesn't mean it's a good play. It does. Winning is sometimes the worst thing that can happen to reinforcing bad behaviors, and you get people that go in for a lot of low probability plays and waste a lot of time making low probability plays when we could have gone for something a little bit more certain, a little bit more concerted, a little bit more strategic, and reliably achieved our objective. And it may be less cool, but we did it,
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so
I mean, there's been entire ops where I've come away from the op after it's finished, and even though we've won and we might have taken 2 or 3 towns, I come away from the op thinking that we've lost
yeah,
uh, a great deal more than we would have been pushed out of the map instantly, because we've done those things, but we didn't deserve to do those things the way that we did them.
right.
So I get what you're saying there, definitely.
All right. So moving on to the last slide here because we are past time. Let's talk just very briefly about leading people with modest egos. We talked a little bit about this even as we started the cast, but we'll come right back to it. But I think it's absolutely critical here to use the principles of constructive feedback. I'm not going to relitigate that whole podcast we did. I think we did that one last week. But there are those principles are absolutely critical in this space. You want to acknowledge development, potential, and progress with individuals that are growing in their competency space. Right? You want to encourage them. You don't want to deflate them, and you want to pick out those things that they do well. Use that the SCS model, support coach support, where you are giving them recognizing what they do well, giving them a heads up of what they need to improve, and then recognizing and thanking them again because you're grateful that they're wanting to pursue that path of self-improvement. Guide them to where they can improve and notice that. You want to avoid harassment and intimidation like the plague because generally speaking, people, when they're in this space, are very self-conscious of their performance already, and the last thing that they're looking for is a ratification or a support of the idea that them screwing up is embarrassing or harmful to them, right? And so when you do come down hard on these guys, it can be extremely destructive to their personal development and their continued participation in working with you. And so you want to be very mindful of that because it's not for everybody, but for many people, significant sources of them staying in a state of unimprovement is because they don't want to receive criticism and feedback. And they're afraid of that negative feedback because people don't like to have that kind of people don't want it to be talked to that way. They don't want to be disrespected. Nobody does, but some people just can't handle it. Or frankly aren't going to handle it. They could handle it, but this is their casual time. This is free time. They're not going to use their free time to get harassed by some asshole over the internet, right? Like it's so you just want to be really really careful about that. Give them achievable assignments to gain confidence. So if we want to compare to this to the former slide, we want to give a challenging assignments to our our high performers, our egomaniacs, if I could call them that. And you want to give very achievable assignments to your low performers to help build confidence. Or your people that are kind of in this modest ego category. You want to give them opportunities to succeed very reliably and show them that they are capable of doing this and slowly grow their skill set over time. Whatever it is that you're trying to develop, maybe it's game sense, maybe it's just even general mechanical technique, maybe they've got some anxiety about X, Y, or Z, but put them in situations that are achievable, things that they can do. And so if we're talking in the context of junior Kriegsmen here, the best thing to do would start with a junior Kriegsman that is a little anxious walking into this is don't give him the full rifle squad and throw him in without any support. That's what we did to Big Null, and fortunately we didn't lose Big Null, but he had a hard way to go about it. We put him in the deep end quick, but instead give him a rifle team during it up. Split him off into his own channel with 2 guys with a very direct and easy to understand task. It doesn't necessarily have to be easy, but it needs to be easy to understand. Maybe it's simply, brother, I need you to take this half track and I need you to make sure that this logi line is secure. Take a radio, take some binos, and I need you to make sure that our logi does not get disrupted. That's your task. The radio tower's already up. Get it done. Report back to me in 20, 30 minutes. That's a good way for a Kriegsman to start cutting his teeth and get in the zone with leading people, managing people a little bit, try to find his feet a little bit. And he's got something that's very very clear and very defined and very easy to understand. You can do that with your riflemen. You can do that with junior leaders, but find those assignments that they can gain confidence and cut their teeth on. And then last but not least, especially with and I think this is the first thing you said, Abbott, as we were to open this up, actively solicit their participation and their ideas. Call them out. Get their feedback and then act on it. If as much as it depends on you, try to find an excuse, find a way to act on it, or use that idea as a part of your brainstorming to come up with something. And so we do this every now and again, like on patrol nights, where we'll just kind of pull the squad. What do you guys want to do, right? Because it's free play. We can do whatever we want. And if I get a recommendation from somebody that I don't typically hear recommendations from, I'm gonna try to find every excuse possible to leverage that excuse and make it work, or to help that idea get better. Because I want that person to realize that they've got that potential. Because a lot of people don't even know their own strength. A lot of people don't realize they have a lot of potential. And I know that Avitus don't, and I don't necessarily see the world the same way, but I'm of the belief that a lot of people, we got a lot of garbage personalities and a lot of garbage behavior in this world, but I look at that as untapped potential. I look at that as people that are undeveloped and have a lot of room to grow, a lot of room to be better. And as leaders, the beautiful thing about being a leader is you can help people grow and be better. And it's not for your own sake, it's not for manipulation, it's because you care about people, if you do, and you want them to be better and you want them to grow. And it's something, as Stark mentioned, I'm passionate about. I love watching people grow. I love watching people get better because I see the impacts it has on their lives, and that's rewarding for me. Because it doesn't just help them in game. I know what it does in your life with your relationships. I know what it can do for your career if you can apply these principles and you can grow as a person and get over some of the vices that are holding you back that you may not even realize. And so, as a leader, helping people grow is an exceptionally rewarding experience. And I know that we can find consensus on that.
Well, as long as the colonials are dying, everything else is gravy. But in all seriousness, I think the way that I see things, I mean, you are very right in the way that we see the world very, very differently. I would say that, and I don't necessarily see the world the correct way. It's just uh, I like to see results. So if something is getting results, then I'm happy. If it's not getting results, then that's where I find frustration with it.
Sure, absolutely. But gentlemen, we are moving pretty well past the time that we had allotted for ourselves. I do want to give some time for any closing statements from everybody. Also, if there's anybody in the chat that wants to ask a question this evening, or you have anything that you'd like to share, feel free to get that in there while we begin to wind this down. But Dark, if you don't mind, I'll start with you. Any closing thoughts for this evening?
I think just lashing back on, like, you want to set people up to succeed rather than to fail. That's just probably like the biggest thing
Mm-hmm.
right there.
Absolutely.
Just
And when they
because
do fail, whose fault is it?
when they do fail, ultimately it's you have to don't think about it as, oh, you failed. It's, well, what could I have done so that way
Mm-hmm.
you would have succeeded?
Right on.
Was the task I assigned you too ambitious, or was, I didn't give you enough people? You know what I mean? It's like, set them up to succeed or to learn something. You know what I mean? Like, don't just, like, okay, this guy has an ego problem, I'm just gonna give him two guys so he can be calm. But it's like, no, you play to their strengths and not just cater to whatever needs they have. Let's
Right.
use them effectively, but as well as, efficiently. Well, if you get what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Avidus, any other closing thoughts?
I would say that um, this ties very deeply into squad management and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. And I would implore anybody watching these videos back or watching the stream right now to really think about ego management. I mean, it's something that's came up a great deal in my own development as a leader. And I would stress its importance. And really, if I was to take anything away from this, I would, as a leader, I would really emphasize commending squad members that do well in combat, because that doesn't just boost their ego, it boosts their self-confidence, it boosts their unity with the clan, and it boosts the general mood in the squad. If a member of your squad is doing well, then everybody should feel that they're doing well. I mean, something that Kaz said earlier on, something that really annoys me in Foxhole is when people say, for instance, "Oh, that's my tank," or I did this and I did it alone, blah blah blah, that sort of thing. Individual actions in the heat of combat are completely different. But by and large on Foxhole, it is a team effort. You're not going to accomplish much on your own. So saying that you're doing something alone is never a good thing. You need to really learn to work as a team and to keep your ego in check when you're engaging the enemy, because Foxhole is unforgiving to people that do not work as a team and conform to people that have been playing the game for a while and know their shit.
I mean, Foxhole, you're absolutely right. Foxhole is especially unforgiving in that domain. But what's interesting is it's more like that's true of any game, any competitive game, but it's more evident in Foxhole, I guess. Like it's more easy to
Yeah.
see. There are other games where you can find ways or to deceive yourself that your team is bringing you down and it's their poor performance, and you can be blind, so blind. We talked about this, I think, last cast or the cast before, but like MOBAs are notorious for that.
Yeah.
I think Dark and I were even talking about this a little bit last night. You kind of walk in and you build all kinds of excuses for why you're losing this game in Dota 2, and my team is a bunch of idiots, and you just kind of
Yeah.
miss your own
I
developmental
think what it
opportunities.
is for me, what frustrates me more than anything, it's like, yes, the first time that somebody fucks up, it is your fault as a leader. You should have explained things better. What I have a problem with is not the first time. It's generally the fourth or fifth.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That's what really
Right.
grinds on me. So, do you have any advice towards that
Absolutely.
end?
Yeah. So here's the deal when you're looking at managing performance, so to speak. So you go in, you advise that person. So let's see. You got a guy. We'll just say this: you got a guy that's just not regrouping, right? That's an easy one. And
Yeah,
you've
had
instilled
plenty of them.
you've instilled it into him over. I need you on this regroup, and then you go in, he doesn't do it, and so you pull him aside after the op and say, hey, listen, man, use that SCS approach. I really appreciated when I had you in the squad when I had you were on point, but I just gotta impress upon you the importance of these regroups. I need you to understand when you're not regrouping with a squad, it slows our turnarounds down, and we're getting into fights less frequently. We're getting to fights late when the team needs us. And so, is there anything I can do better to help you anticipate that? Anything I can do to help you be more consistent on that? See where the conversation goes, right?
Yeah.
And then after that conversation, he still struggles with it. At that point, you come up to him and said, "Listen, dude, I'm really struggling, with this, as we talked about before. Once again, I need you to help me understand what I need to do differently, because at the end of the day, if I can't understand why this is a problem, I'm going to struggle to continue working with you in this unit. I may ultimately recommend that maybe you need a different squad leader, because I don't know if I can continue to lead like this." And be successful, right? And so you heard a lot of I statements in there, right? It's you're not the problem, I'm the problem. You're not the problem, I'm the problem. It's very humbling to do that, but you're trying to give this individual every opportunity to succeed, and then ultimately, if he can't succeed in that role, nudge him into a place where he's going to be more successful. Maybe it's just a bad fit. Maybe another squad leader would be a better fit. Let's always keep our minds open to that. Maybe a different division's a better fit. Maybe this guy belongs in CE. Maybe he belongs doing something else, and he's just not a good infantryman for whatever reason. I've had plenty of those guys that I've had, and some of those have been good fits elsewhere. Some of them have not been good fits elsewhere. Frankly, they've gone and they've failed in another battalion. But I think we owe it to people to give them a shot and to understand that if they're not working out with one leader, then maybe it's just not a cultural fit. And just being
Right.
open-minded to that, I think, is the way to go, instead of just saying this guy is useless chaff who can't understand and cannot follow me. There's and this comes from my perspective of being very conciliatory, right? That I'm looking for an excuse to give this guy the benefit of the doubt at every single turn.
Other than that, I would just say thank you for having me on
Yeah.
under the helmet, and I would look forward to the next stream if I'm around for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So with all that being said, guys, I think we're going to go ahead and cut the stream here. Thank you for coming out and listening to this tonight. And of course, any feedback, we talked about feedback, but any feedback you give us, we're definitely eager to hear it on either topics, content, the way that we're managing this. All of that stuff is stuff that is useful for us to improve and to grow. So we're grateful to hear it. And with all that being said, have a good night, guys.
Catch you later, guys.
Later's buddies.